Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back again to NPTEL online certification course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. In our last two lectures, we have discussed about methods of data collection. First we discussed about the observation based survey and then perception based survey. Both of them were having certain advantages, disadvantages and very much pertinent to the research in planning and architecture. So, they both have a very good role to play in terms of collecting information when you want to involve subjects into it. Now, in the same line as I promised earlier, today we will have the final lecture on this methods of data collection, which is titled Methods of Data Collection Part 3, and here we will be discussing about the expert based survey and expert based data collection. So, let us focus on this particular lecture where we will discuss about the expert based data collection, importance of expert based survey where we collect information from expert and who are the expert, that also we want to understand. Types of expert based data collection, number of expert, this is a very important questions and many a times these are asked my students or maybe in some cases like when we submitted certain paper, there were certain kind of reviews where they ask about that, okay, what should be the ideal size and what size you have considered, is there any kind of reference. So, like that, based on those kind of study and inferences, we figured out certain observation that what kind of sample size, in this case the number of expert, it is not exactly referred as a sample size. So, that we need to determine. So, let us understand this one by one. So, expert based data collection involves systematically soliciting and integrating the insights of individual recognized for their specialized knowledge or skill. So, in this case how it is different from a user and expert. So, like how we can like make difference that okay, this particular person is expert and this is user. So, normally when we take some sort of perception based survey, or when you just go for a perception based survey, we take any person who are having certain sort of understanding about those kind of activity, those space, etc. But it may not be that person is technically very sound and having all the information about know-how and the all the aspect of this particular facility. But whenever like we select one person having a true knowledge that what is happening, how it is happening, and then maybe worked in the field that we are doing research, we consider them as expert. So, definitely in this case you can say that if I give one example, like if you interact with any pedestrian on street, so probably they can only share their experience, but they do not know the solutions or maybe they do not know why it is happening. They can only share their experience and their perception. Compared to that, if somebody who has worked on the transportation field and especially on the pedestrian and mobility planning will have those understanding, then why it is happening, what could be the reason and all, because he or she has been doing this work since long. So, having a better brief about this subject. So, in that case definitely it is something like you have to systematically solicit the data and also you have to integrate the insight. These methods are pivotal when in-depth understanding and forward-looking insights are required. So, it is not only the problem that to be identified, even in some cases towards the solution that we are thinking of, how relevant it is, if we consider certain factors which may lead to certain situation in a particular problem. So, we can take those insights, we can take insights from expert about those factors, their priorities, their weightages, as because they are in that particular field. Now, this expert can be academician, can be a researcher who has experience in this, it can be somebody who are experienced not in a academic research, but having extensive field experience and working on ground. So, probably can give some insight. So, it depending on the type of research that you are conducting, your type of expert may change, their qualification may change, but normally it should be something who are having in-depth idea about the topic that you are working on. That is why the question is, who are experts? Experts are individuals with extensive knowledge or ability based on research. This is something that the researcher based on experience. Many a times maybe one may not have so called like degree or research degree, but working in the field since long, and that individual's experience is as good as like some kind of research input in your research. So, that is there, or maybe it is something the occupation, sharing the experience and the year of working experience of that particular person in that company. So, this is something like you need to identify. They are often recognized by their peers, like definitely when we talk about the researchers. So, definitely if you find that okay, particular paper that you are referring, that one or two authors, they are being cited most frequently, and then you find and identify that okay, this particular researcher is doing something in your field. Suppose if you are intent to do something on the resilient infrastructure and all, and you find some XYZ person who are working in this since last 20 years and having good publication which are being referred, cited many times. So, definitely that particular individual or the researcher is definitely expert. So, it can be identified by the peers, or maybe it can be through the track record of the publication I just mentioned, or it may have a significant practical experience, like maybe academically, like we can interact with those researcher who are working in the R&D field, research institution or academic institution, like we can interact with the professors or the senior researcher who are doing say or completed the PhD or something like that. We can always interact, but many a times it may happen that formally one may not have the PhD degree or any such kind of research degree, but having very good experience in that. So, that is something also very important to consider in the expert. So, there should be some sort of, even in your research you may require expert from various discipline, or with the various credentials, like one from having good publication, one may be having a year of experience and good hold on this subject, so that you can have a proper common understanding, or maybe all those kind of inputs can collate and then bring out something in that kind of common idea. The role of expert in data collection: the expert contribute to data collection by providing insight based on their deep and often the tacit knowledge. So, this is something very important, because many new ideas can come up if you interact, if you seek expert opinion during your questionnaire making. Maybe your questionnaire will look good, because some of the questions maybe you missed out. Based on their experience, they can suggest that you can reframe this question like this, or you will restructure this question like this. That can help. If you take that input as some kind of insight to quantify certain information or making certain priority of information, that may also help you. They can validate, they can supplement, or maybe they can also refute the theoretical and empirical findings. So, it is not always that they will be in your favor or validate that whatever you are doing right. So, they may have a kind of rebuttal, they may have a counter argument which is also good at the initial stage to rectify. So, this is something very important, often contributing to the refinement of data collection tool and also the method, but you can also involve them in your overall insight. So, probably it is not the data collection or identifying the factors for the study, even for priority intervention for certain thing as well. Identifying the right experts is very important for researcher. So, in this case, identifying right expert involves assessing their educational background, their experience, their publication, if you want to seek some kind of researcher in that, and recognition in the field. So, all of them are important, but maybe you may not get everything for one particular person, but even if like somebody has worked 20 years in the field without having certain publication, it is worth, because having some kind of ground knowledge, having some field experience, probably in many cases like the academician, what they are doing theoretical research, they may lack some understanding of the practical aspect of this phenomena. So, in such cases, like you need to bring both of them into that platform, and then you can do the interview. Verification includes checking of references, citation and contribution in the field of their expertise. So, whenever you say that how you check, so normally if you find somebody is getting cited in a rapid manner, so definitely his or her research is very impactful. So, you can consider that particular person. So, like that you can check and you can take a call on that who will be your right expert. Now, methods of engaging experts. So, in such cases definitely the engagement can be done through one-on-one interviews, or it may be like focus group discussion where group of people can come together. Maybe we can apply the Delphi technique for this, or is it can be a expert panel as well. The choice of one-to-one interview or the Delphi or the panel of expert, it will all depend on the research goals that you set, available resources that you have, and the nature of expertise that you require. So, if it is something very homogeneous group and which is doable, like take personal interview, you can achieve. If it is something, definitely it is something that you want, that it should be a focus group, and then you apply the Delphi method to go for several round of discussion to bring those kind of conclusion that you can do, or else it can be a panel, expert panel as well. We will discuss one by one all of this type of methods in engaging expert. For one-on-one personal interview, researchers may tend to get more information out of the conversation, and it is easier to stay on track. So, whenever you go for interviewing one particular expert, the dialogue and the conversation is something very focused. So, definitely which is not the case when you have a group of people or group of expert together, because there might be some influence of other expert on others, argument, the debate on a topic, but when it is one to one, you can have follow up questions and you can definitely bring some more insight. So, this is definitely one of the very useful method that you can adopt. Interviewer can explore different aspect the topic in depth, and it is done with each of the interviewees. So, it is one expert at a time. But at the same time there might be some sort of problems, because whenever you go for one by one, so one may give some aspect, and then when you interact with another expert, that expert can give you some different kind of direction or different kind of insight. So, bringing them together to get a common findings or to make a conclusion out of it. So, many a times it will be difficult if it is not done in a very systematic manner or in a some kind of scientific questionnaire. Because in some cases if you go for a open ended interview and then you just come up with the text and then you just try to map those texts, is very difficult, and there might be some sort of controlling variables that you see it in the text mining which may lead to a different kind of results. But if you apply certain scientifically done questionnaire and a structured questionnaire, and in that case definitely most of the expert based survey, they do have certain kind of consistency check in their responses. So that you will have one check where you can again interact with the expert that okay, probably this particular answer is not consistent, so would you like to change your perception. So that way you can definitely conduct this one-to-one personal interview for the expert based survey. Coming to the Delphi method, this is also very well established method, and nowadays also this Delphi is getting modified. There are application of fuzzy Delphi technique and all. So definitely if you are interested you can look into those topics. But what essentially Delphi method does, this method is a structured communication technique originally developed as a systematic and interactive forecasting method. It relies on panel of experts who answer questionnaire 2 or more rounds. Why 2 or more? Because suppose you get one set of answers from say 5 experts are there, but you find that there are certain sort of variation, there are certain sort of heterogeneity among their answers, and you cannot take them as a conclusive decision. So in that case again you have to go back, and like that you can have certain kind of iteration to get the findings. After each round, a facilitator, maybe researcher himself or herself, provides an anonymous summary of the expert forecast and reasons. So that is something here I present the summary of the overall findings to each of them, and we do not disclose that who has given those answers or who has not. So like that, looking at the overall summary and trend, then the expert may make certain kind of check on his or her responses what they have given, and then they can modify it, so that finally it will come to some sort of common consensus among all the expert of that particular study. So the process continues until consensus is reached. So it may take 2 rounds, 3 rounds, it is all depending on number of questions, the complexity of those questions. So I cannot give you any kind of numbers which will be the optimal number for the rounds. So normally if the questionnaire is well structured, if it is easy to follow, if the facilitator can explain those questions to the expert in a right manner, so it will not take much time. It can also be achieved that kind of consensus by 2 or 3 rounds, but it can even go beyond if there are too many complexities. Even sometimes the number of expert that matters, because if you go with very less, probably you can very easily do those kind of trick, but that may not be adequate for your research purpose. But whenever you increase the number, if you plan to have Delphi for say 30-40%, it is very difficult, probably that is something going to be very complex. So in that case probably you have to also decide upon the size, and for your field you also refer to the past literature that what kind of sample size they are doing, and there are papers on the number of expert to be selected, and there are certain kind of observations. So there are certain papers where the authors talked about that they have conducted the survey with varying the expert, and then how the findings are differed, how much time they incurred in coming to this kind of consensus. Now the third category is about the expert panel and the focus group. So expert panel involves a group of experts discussing and coming to a particular consensus on a specific issue. Focus group, while similar, typically involve more general discussion and less directed consensus building. So, in this case, unlike Delphi, where each round we are going to summarize what others say, it is much more of, like you can say, a common discussion where all the experts are coming together and the facilitator, based on certain kind of discussion or with answer to a questions, there will be some kind of common consensus that they are building. In this case, like you can have a general discussion or you can have a less directed consensus building. In both methods, they are valuable for collecting qualitative data from several experts simultaneously. So, this is something is very important. So, Delphi technique you can do even in such cases that you can send out the questionnaire. They need not to be at the same time at the same platform. It may be something that you just approach to that question, you get certain thing, then you summarize and you send back this answer. So, now let us understand the difference between these three clearly. One to one, where whatever the consistency that you checked at the consistency level and you can report to that particular expert, whether that expert will change his or her responses towards that to make their observations or the insight consistent. For the Delphi, that if there are 5 experts, you are sending them questionnaire, you are asking them, they may not to be present physically at the same place and simultaneously they do not need to answer it based on their answer and the expert thing. So, you the facilitator or the researcher summarize the findings and give that this is something is coming up. So, based on that, definitely there will be deviation in the perception or insight given by each of the expert, and then if they would like to change. So, with that change, definitely again that summary will change. So, like that, once you get similar kind of findings or that particular common consensus is achieved, those kind of iteration can take place. Whereas compared to that, the expert panel or focus group is where you bring all the expert together and it is the discussion that is going on and you can capture their insight at the same time. The simultaneously you can do that. The next question is that how many experts? The number of experts needed in a study can vary widely depending on factors. First, the method used, where you go for one-to-one interview or the Delphi or the expert panel. So, it will depend on that. Definitely when you go for one-to-one, you have the flexibility, you can increase the number of experts as long as their response are consistent with the available tools or the the statistical methods that you are applying, whether you are going for analytical hierarchy process or ANP or maybe the best first method. There are like a number of methods available. I will show you with certain case studies that what kind of expert survey we have conducted in our research or some of the other papers that we have referred, and will be presenting you those kind of process where what kind of method used and how they have captured the expert opinion. Now, whenever it is like panel and all, to manage the expert and then to bring a common consensus, so definitely the number cannot be infinite or too big, but it all depends on the type of questions, the complexity of the questions and the research that you are going to do. So, for that you have to refer to the old literature and then make a track that what kind of sample size are acceptable, and then you can also do around that number. Diversity needed among the experts. So, in this case also, if you have a plan that okay, for this particular research I want 50% from the academic side, 50% from the industry side, or maybe I can make a different split like 30% from academic, 30% from industry, 20% from some other stakeholder, or maybe something some other criteria that you fit, that to bring those kind of diversity in the expert panel or the expert to be interviewed. Objectives of the study, definitely it will depend on that, depending on the research need and research objective, you will have this. While there is no one size fits all answer for this, how many number of expert, the research suggests that a smaller group of highly knowledgeable experts is often more effective than a larger, less specialized group. So, this is something I said that after reading so many literatures and even conducting some number of expert based interview for certain research. So, that is also I believe that if you have a very specialized experts group, as because we are giving those kind of attribute to them, like at least we recognize them based on their publication, based on their experience. So, if even if it is 5 expert or 6 experts, but they are highly knowledgeable, and even in that case we are getting certain sort of homogeneity in their perception of what typical topic they know very well. So, that outcome is much more influential to just increase the number, and then probably we can just select anyone, like maybe not very experienced, and just in order to increase the number we just include them in the expert panel, or maybe one-to-one interview. That may lead to some kind of issues in terms of bringing the consensus, and then also the problem in identifying the problems in a right manner. Now, ensuring quality response is what you need to do. So, for that you have to ensure the anonymity, encourages the honesty, but many times you should offer the respondent to leave contact information to follow up research. So, this is very important for a quality research. So, suppose if you go for a one-to-one expert interview, so in that case you should know the expert, you should have those contact details of the expert, because of like communicating the findings, or maybe in case of Delphi and all, to present the summary you need to follow up, which is not the case probably for the user based survey, because there we do not need any kind of personal information, because it is something like a random sample, but which is not the case for the expert base. So, that is there, but at the same times it is very important that whenever you report that, whenever you write the findings, there are certain sort of ethical approval required, whether you are allowed to publish their name in a journal paper. Mostly researchers they do not do it, but they only code them like expert 1, expert 2, and can write that the position or maybe the experience or the field of interest, instead of directly giving the personal information in research writing. So, that is something that you keep at your end. You can note down their personal information in order to go back and forth about the observations that you make, or maybe whatever the insights the experts already given. So, to check it with the common findings. So, you need that contact, but never use that in your research writing without any consent, and then only the information like you can refer about the experience, field of interest, so that it will bring some kind of confidence among the reviewer of your papers to, okay, so this particular case the expert is having more than 20 years. So, okay, so probably this is something a valid response. Keep the survey at a reasonable length to respect the respondent time and prevent survey fatigue. So, expert based questionnaire or any questionnaire, this is a common idea, or it is something like to be maintained, that the number of questions should be very precise and it should not be very complex and lengthy. If you have say a particular 5-10 pages questions, okay, so then if you expect the expert to answer each of them, it will be very much tiring. Whether you need that 10-page questionnaire, can you break it, can you group it, can you bring those kind of insights with less number of questions? So, you spend time on designing the questionnaire, and then please remove all those questions which may not be required to seek attention of expert. Even if it is to be applied for the users, then also it should be very much focused. The question should be mutually exclusive. There should not be too many questions on the similar outcome. And then probably if at all that you are having no plan to use certain information, don't collect it, because that is something will increase the time of response, and then probably users may get fatigued, and for the expert also it is many a times is a very challenging, and then bringing those kind of consensus is again another challenging part for that. So, this is 2 points that you need to keep in your mind. One thing is that questionnaire should be very focused, it should not contain the unnecessary questions. At the same time, the information related to the expert to be kept within yourself, so that you can communicate if required once again, but you do not publish those personal information without consent, and it is not required. Most of the cases, like researcher, they do not put those kind of information in paper, only the experience and then field, and then whether it is from the academic side or industry side, those kind of informations are good enough. Now, coming to the summary of this particular lecture. So, in this case we have discussed about the importance of expert based opinion. So, who are the expert? Who are having subject knowledge, maybe through extensive research, maybe through the field experience, or maybe it is something like both in some cases. So, who can have a better insight on that field, and then probably have gone through such kind of activity in terms of research or in terms of field implementation, can give you more insight to that topic. Now, we also discussed about the importance of this survey, because many a times like which something is not very easy to capture, as a researcher we are not very sure. So, in such cases the expert can help us in developing this. It can be like identifying the factors, shortlisting of the factors, and then identifying the critical factors for any certain study, or else it is something, even the questions, even the questionnaire, if you want to get validated from expert that okay, whether it is very pertinent and it will give some sort of insight while getting the data, and then probably we can do a meaningful analysis, we can check it, or even the results also we can discuss. Types of experts survey, in this case we have discussed 3 type: one on one, where you interact with one expert at a time, and then you can check consistency of those responses through some established statistical tools. Then we discussed about Delphi, which is again some sort of method where you do some iteration, where you get the findings, you summarize the findings without mentioning the expert name and other credentials, and you express that okay, this is the findings of the other expert, and then would you like to change your observations or insight. Along that you keep on doing this with the iteration, and then you do this and continue this unless you get the consensus. And then the third one what we discussed, that is about the you can say that it is something like focus group, or you can say that panel. So, in that case a group of expert simultaneously responding to a discussion, and then they are developing some sort of consensus about those factors, whether it is identifying critical factors, whether it is discussing about certain phenomena that being observed, whether it is correct or incorrect, etc. And the facilitator or the moderator or maybe the researcher, they can play in that particular activity, that this is something, the outcome of the expert based opinion. And these are very pertinent for our planning and architectural research, and along with the observation survey and perception survey, this is also playing a crucial role. So, selection of the right data collection method, it depends on your survey design, depending on your research need. And then in this case also we have discussed the number of expert, as most of the research they said that if you have this number of expert but they are highly qualified, their credentials is truly fitting to your research domain. So, even the response from those kind of highly experienced expert is much better than just increasing the number who are not having much specialization or those kind of experiences. So, that number of expert, the type of surveys, that you should decide based on your need, based on your resources, based on your availability of those expert in the geographic region where you are making your study, and also definitely looking at the other past literature who have done on those kind of expert based opinion, and then you can decide on the number of experts. So, with that we end these particular 3 lectures back to back on methods of data collection. First we discussed observational survey, then we discussed about perception based survey, and then this is for the expert survey. Hope that with these 3 lectures, if you have gone through previous to, and if you are going through this, so it will definitely give you some more insight and some sort of idea and some power of taking a decision which method you should require for your research. If you have any doubt, let me know by writing in the forum that I hope that you have joined. If you have not joined yet, please join there, and then we can have more discussion to clarify your doubts regarding this. I will be very happy to interact with you in that forum. So, with that this is the end of this lecture. These are few study material. So, with that next lecture is very interesting when we talk about different kind of perception based survey and where you involve users and all. So, at the same time the ethics in data management, because once you gather the information like from the users, their experience, their psychological behavior or their some kind of activity, it is always important for researchers to follow that kind of ethics. So, ethics in data management and the data uses, what we can do, what we cannot do as researcher with those information, we will be discussing on that in our next lecture, which will be lecture number 29. So, we will be meeting with my next lecture on this. So, till then, thank you for joining the course. Bye bye.